Ladies and gentlemen, it's September. The kids are back to school, and my daughter recently said to me, "Daddy, I do not want to do my homework on the kitchen table anymore." And I said, "Where do you want to do it, on the kitchen floor?" And she said, "No, I want a desk." And I thought, yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense. A real desk is a serious project. It could take weeks to make a good one, but we don't have that kind of time. School is going on now, and my kid needs a desk now. Luckily, we can look back to a time when people cranked out desks quickly so that students could get straight to work. In the 19th century, America was a nation of farmers. Families were spread out, and public education was only just reaching some parts of the country. This was the era of the one-room schoolhouse, where a single teacher taught students of every age. These schoolhouses were community projects, and they had to be furnished fast. Farmers often took time away from their work to get schools up and running, and these country craftsmen came up with the classic schoolhouse desk. These were simple, sturdy pieces of furniture that could be assembled quickly from boards and a handful of nails. The lack of joinery made them fast to build, but they weren't flimsy, and lots of these desks have survived in surprisingly good condition. This form even appears in Henry David Thoreau's classic memoir, Walden, the dullest, most overrated, most unreadable book in all of American literature. These schoolhouse desks were fast and sturdy and also had comfortable sloped surfaces for writing and hinged lids with deep storage underneath. A desk like this could hold books, papers, and even a lunch. These desks look like quaint antiques, but they're efficient and thoughtful. They're still ready for today's kids. So my designer and I took the best elements from all of these desks and put them together into this 3D model. And I got to work. This is an economical build. You'll need 3 boards of plain white pine from the home center and a single 2x4. You'll even have some stock left over. Cross-cutting the stock will go quickly if you use a saw bench. Getting up over the work and using the big muscles in your back makes the work faster and much less tiring. As you get to the end of each cut, be sure to control the off-cut and prevent splintering. Making clean cuts now will make the rest of the build much easier. Do all the cross cuts at once, and your build will move along quickly. Now we'll make those saw cuts clean and square on the shooting board. I recently bought a fancy shooting plane because it's very ergonomic. The angled handle and skewed iron not only make a perfect cut, they also save a lot of wear and tear on my elbow. Most of your components are simple rectangles, but these side pieces have a critical slope. They also need to be identical. I stick 2 pieces of stock together with blue tape and super glue. Joint one edge for reference, and then lay out my slope. A straight scrap of wood makes a perfectly good straight edge, and you're ready to saw. I use a rip saw to make the cut, and then level off my edge with a finely set jack plane. My legs are just made from common 2x4. I went with fir for its excellent strength, and I carefully picked a piece with straight grain and few knots. Here, I'm just gauging a line down the middle and then darkening it with a pencil. Then, it's over to the saw bench to rip the legs apart. Notice how I'm keeping the stock oriented along the bench instead of across it. This gives much better support for difficult rip cuts. My homemade jointer plane quickly squares up that saw cut. I lay out my taper along the edge of each leg, and then it's over to the chopping block, where I can quickly waste away most of my material with an axe before finishing up at the bench, using a foreplane to take off the axe marks and a jointer for a smooth, crisp edge. You can make both of these planes from spare parts and wood scraps, and we have a great set of plans to show you the whole process. Now, no matter how carefully you choose your stock, you might end up with a knot like this one. You are not going to plane or chop your way through something like this. Instead, rip down past the knot and cross-cut it off. Then you can plane the rest of the taper without worrying. Of course, you don't have to taper your legs at all. Lots of these desks have plain, straight legs, but I find those crude looking. I'm sure they did the job, but this piece is going in my home, and I like a little bit of style in my furniture. With the legs complete, I just need 2 large panels to make the lid and the bottom. But that's easy. I'll get my stock up on edge, put it in the vise, and joint those edges together to cancel out any inaccuracies. I'm going for a fast and hassle-free glue up, so I'm going to use a sprung joint. I'll deliberately plane my edge hollow by taking short strokes in the middle and slowly lengthening my stroke until I do the whole edge in a single pass. That hollow edge allows me to use a single clamp right in the middle As I tighten that clamp, you can see glue squeezing out at the ends, but the center of that joint won't come together until the clamp is fully tight. This type of joint puts the whole edge under consistent pressure with only one clamp. Then you just make sure everything's flat and let it dry. While that dries, we can get started on the joinery. But that takes a little bit of planning. I really like square, cut nails for their amazing hold, and I install them with one of these tapered drill bits to keep the wood from splitting. If you don't want a spring for these fancy nails, lots of these desks were made with plain, round nails, and you can easily find these ring shank nails, which grip a lot better than smooth ones. You also need to practice with your fasteners, so you don't split those parts you just made so carefully. Let's say I'm joining a side to a leg. I'll pre-drill and then slowly sink a nail with the wider side oriented along the grain. I'm watching for splitting as the nail goes in. Sometimes you need to change drill bits for the right fit. I'm also going to be nailing into end grain, which can be tricky. This time, I'm sinking 2 nails to be sure the whole joint will stay together. I did get some splitting when I put one nail too close to the edge, but this is no problem. Make your mistakes on your test pieces, and your actual project will come out fine. Oh, and your nail heads are going to get in the way of final surfacing. So take a minute now and smooth plane all your show surfaces. Now is the time. We can quickly get our piece assembled and standing up by nailing all 4 corners. These flat pieces are slippery, and it can be frustrating to hold them while you drive your nails. So I use a square to get everything lined up, and then squeeze in a couple drops of super glue right at the edges. Give it a second to dry, and the pieces will have a nice temporary hold while you drill and drive your nails. When I did my second side, I got even smarter, and I glued both legs to the side panel, put a couple of hand planes on top as clamps, and then I was ready to do the whole side in one shot. With 2 sides done, I used screw clamps to hold my pieces steady while I placed the back and nailed it on. One of my nails did break out that end grain just a little bit, so I flooded the broken fibers with CA glue and then trimmed everything flush with a chisel once it was dry. Adding the front is easy, but your last corner might not line up perfectly. We are using cheap wood. Here's an easy fix. Start a finishing nail and then carefully line up your pieces. Then drive the nail all the way home. That will keep your joint together while you sink the heavier nails. Now I've got a complete frame, and it's time to add the bottom. A lot of these were just nailed in from the ends, but that doesn't give a lot of support. So I'm going to glue in some little cleats and tack them in place. Then I'll trim the bottom until it just fits and climb underneath to trace the legs onto the bottom. I trim away those corners and, yep, that's my daughter, just off camera, and that bottom drops right in. I put a dab of glue on those cleats so the bottom will stay put, even as the seasons change. A lot of these old desks also had a shelf in back to maximize storage, and I think that's a good idea. Of course, my daughter wanted to help at this point, and it is her desk, so here I am showing her how to cross-cut with a Dazuki. She was honestly pretty good. A smart way to add the shelf is to use the tops of the rear legs as a support and extend them forward with a couple of cleats. The shelf is made from leftover stock and it's glued to the cleats. A little light clamping is plenty. The last big piece of the project is the lid. Once the glue joint dries, I'm going to dress and flatten both sides. This piece will really be on display, so I want it to look extra nice. Most of these desks were pretty plain, but I'm going to dress mine up with a little bit of molding. Here, I'm cutting a wide, shallow rabbet around the edge of the lid. I'm using this Umiya moving philistor plane. These are great tools. They work both with and across the grain. They handle wide rabbets and they're affordable. I bought this one used, but the ECE company still makes this exact model for about $180. I'm working cross grain here, so a little pre-cutting at the end will prevent blowout and allow me to work all the way across the board. Once the rabbet is done, I just come in with a smoothing plane and gradually round over the corner. This style of molding is called a thumbnail. It's attractive, period correct, and you can make it without any molding planes. So it's my favorite decoration. I'm going to wrap this molding all the way around the edges and front of the lid. It's easy to do, but you have to be careful and watch those corners to make sure everything lines up with crisp angles and smooth curves. This is where your craftsmanship will really be on display. There's also a small piece that sits behind the lid, and that needs to be molded so that it matches the rest of the top. This time, I'll back the piece up with a bit of scrap, cut my rabbet, do my round over, and let the scrap absorb the blowout. The completed part looks nice, and I quickly tack it onto the case before I finish the lid. Of course, any big, solid wood panel is going to warp and twist with the seasons if it's not secured. So I've made a pair of battens out of scrap, drilled holes through them, and then widened those holes with a little round file. By screwing them onto the underside of the lid, everything will stay flat, but the lid can also move with the seasons. Now I just need to install the hinges, and that's easiest with the lid in the vise. I trace right around the hinges with a sharp knife, then set a marking gauge to half the thickness of the hinge and mark my depth. Then I can just chisel out the waste, and my hinge drops right in. I get the hinges installed on the case, and with the case on its back, I use the vise to bring the lid up to the right height and run in those screws. The lid closes smoothly, and the piece is almost finished. Now we're just down to details. That sloped lid is very comfortable to write on, but books and papers can just slide right into your lap. So I'll rip a thin scrap of maple, and it's too small to grab in my vise, so I'll just grab a hand plane upside down and move the wood over the plane. This allows me to smooth it out and also bevel the edges and the corners, so there's nothing sharp to grab the hand. A little glue and a couple of clamps is all I need to get this piece installed, and then it's just down to a bit of decoration. Throughout the whole build, we kept coming back to this example, and its lovely, quirky little crest detail on the back. I showed it to my daughter, and she loved it right away. It took me a little while to lay out this detail, and I needed a compass and a protractor, but the plans for this project have a nice, printable template that you can just paste onto a piece of wood and start cutting. My shop-made turning saw gets the profile roughed out, and then I use a combination of a spoke shave, a couple of files, and some sandpaper to get fair curves and a nice surface. You have to be a little creative gluing that crest on, but a scrap on top protects those curves and spreads out the clamping pressure. At this point, I've made a bunch of pieces that you might call country furniture. I think it's my favorite style because the pieces are sturdy and functional, but the craftspeople who made these pieces also added little details like extra shelves or a bit of whimsical decoration. Country craftsmen lived hard lives, but they still managed to squeeze in a little creativity in their work. As we adapt these pieces to our modern homes, it's not too hard to refine them. Little touches like tapered legs and a simple molding will help a rustic piece fit in with the rest of my furniture. I love to find these old pieces and just tweak them a little. If you like this approach, you can do it too. You don't need to wait for me to show you how. So this desk isn't particularly difficult to build, but there are a lot of details, more details than I could ever really show in a YouTube video. That's why we've come out with a comprehensive set of plans. They've got everything you need to go from a stack of boards all the way to a finished project. And we always include as many details as we can. Metric conversions on all the numbers, a printable template for that detail, and everything is now modeled in Fusion 360, so all the graphics are crisp and really easy to read. And of course, all of our plans are always available at an affordable price. And just recently, my team and I realized that we have done a lot of softwood projects in the last year or so. A lot of stuff made just from pine boards and construction lumber. And we realized it was time to put together our Softwood Furniture Bundle. And it has got 5 fantastic projects in it. Everything from a simple wall box to a stool, a blanket chest, and even a kitchen cupboard. And they're all made from cheap pine and construction lumber that you can get at the big box store. When you get all 5 plans together, you save a lot of money. And we're going to put the bundle on sale just for the next week. So grab it now to get the best value on some of our best plans. There's a link to all this stuff down in the description, or you can go to rexkrueger.com/store. And I always have to thank my patrons on Patreon, who provide the support and the community that makes all of this stuff possible. If you'd like to be one of those people, go on over to patreon.com/rexkrueger and check out all the rewards and extras I have just for my patrons. For instance, all of those plans I just talked about, including that big plan bundle, well, my patrons just got all of that stuff for free just this morning. It's just one of the perks we offer for the people who make these videos possible. I appreciate them a lot. I also really appreciate just having viewers. So thanks for watching.